Further south, generally a frosty start to the day with temperatures in rural parts down to -1 or -2 Celsius. A chilly start but a bright start, plenty of sunshine first thing, but the area of cloud to the north tends to sink south, turning cloudy for many places, but not a great deal of wet weather associated with the cloud. Mostly it's dry, the rain confined to windward coasts and hills of Wales, northwest England and western Scotland. A milder day, though, with that increased cloud cover coming in from the Atlantic, temperatures up to 10 to 13 Celsius. And then we keep a lot of the cloud cover on Friday night. Some clear spells around, so decent viewing conditions, I think, for bonfire night, with a lot of dry weather away from the northwest. It does turn more unsettled in the northwest this weekend, with heavy rain and strong winds for northern and western Scotland. It also turns milder.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing with me, Gloria de Piero. Lots coming up today after accusations over so-called Tory sleaze. In the last couple of hours, we've had a government U-turn on plans to reform the standards process and the announcement of a new vote on the decision to suspend Owen Paterson. We'll talk to a former chair of the Privileges Committee and get his take on the mess. Plus, an exclusive interview with Johnny Mercer. But first, it's the news with Rosie.
Good afternoon, I'm Rosie Wright. This is your news at 12 o'clock. The government have performed a U-turn over the proposed changes to disciplinary proceedings for members of Parliament. Speaking this morning, Jacob Rees-Mogg says that any changes to the standards had now to be done on a cross-party basis. The Leader of the Commons said that the link between the changes and the MP Owen Paterson's case had to be broken. MPs will now have an emergency debate next Monday to discuss the standard system. Well, the Commons leader admitted the vote had been contentious.
While there is a very strong feeling on both sides of the House that there is a need for an appeals process, there is equally a strong feeling that this should not be based on a single case or applied retrospectively. I fear last night's debate conflated the individual case with the general concern. This link needs to be broken.
The first pill designed to treat coronavirus has been approved by the UK medicines regulator. The tablet, Molnupiravir, will be given to patients recently diagnosed and tested positive with COVID and those who are vulnerable to illnesses like diabetes or heart disease. In clinical trials, the drug, developed by a US company, cut the risk of hospitalisation or death. The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, described it as a game changer. Cervical cancer rates are almost 90% lower in women who had the HPV vaccine as children. A study published in The Lancet looked at the incidence rates in those who had the jab when they were at school. Well, it found that those in their 20s now who had the dose between the ages of 12 and 13 were far less likely to develop the disease compared with those who weren't vaccinated. Cancer Research UK described the findings as historic. Australian police have charged a 36-year-old man in connection with the abduction of the 4-year-old Cleo Smith. She was taken from her family's tent in a campsite in Australia more than 3 weeks ago. Well, she was found alive and well in a locked house yesterday morning. Police have also released their recording of the moment they discovered her.
I got her. I've got her. Hey, Bobby.
Bring the camera in.
Hey, come here. Come here. I've got you, Bobby.
What's your name?
You're alright.
What's your name? What's your name, sweetheart?
My name is Cleo.
Your name is
You're alright,
Cleo.
Bobby.
Hello, Cleo.
More than 40 countries, including the UK, have pledged to quit using coal, the single biggest contributor to climate change. The commitments were made during the COP26 summit in Glasgow, following a UK-led coal-to-clean power transition plan. Countries including Poland, Vietnam and Chile have vowed to phase out coal power in the 2030s. Poorer nations have until the 2040s to make the transition. Australia, India, China, the US, some of the largest consumers of coal, didn't sign up to the pledge. Cricketer Azim Rafiq says the problem with a racial slur used against him by a teammate is about institutional racism rather than the use of specific words. While posting on Twitter, the 30-year-old who played for Yorkshire County Cricket Club said the sport he loves needs reform and change. Former England cricketer Gary Ballance has admitted using the slur against Rafiq and that he regrets saying it. A bird flu prevention zone has been declared across Britain after a rise in detection of the disease. It's now going to be a legal requirement for all bird keepers to follow strict biosecurity measures to help protect their flocks. The chief veterinary officers of England, Wales and Scotland say the actions must be taken now to prevent the flu spreading further to other poultry and domestic birds. Officials say the risk to the public is very low. The retailer John Lewis has released its annual Christmas advert this morning, around a fortnight earlier than expected. Well, this year's story is based on that schoolboy building a friendship with an alien. The department store recently had to withdraw a home insurance advert that showed a child making a mess at home after the Financial Conduct Authority said it could be misleading. You are up to date here on GB News. I'll be back at 12:30 for another update. But now to the briefing with Gloria.
We've got a packed show for you today, coming up this hour on The Briefing, with accusations flying about Tory sleaze and the news that MPs will have another vote on whether or not to suspend Owen Paterson. We talked to one former chair of the Privileged Committee and get his take on the best way to resolve the mess. But does any of it matter to voters? Does it matter to you? We'll talk to the pollster's pollster, Sir John Curtis, for his view. And we'll have the latest in my special interview series, The Real Me. Today, former Veterans Minister Johnny Mercer. And we talk Boris, betrayal and being sacked. Give me your political briefing. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Our top story, sleaze. Well, yesterday, MPs voted not to abide by the Standards Committee ruling and to suspend one of their number, Owen Paterson, for taking money from two companies and asking questions on those companies' behalf. In fact, Tory MPs were whipped to vote down the suspension. Cue outraged headlines from both the left and the right of the press. The Guardian cried corruption, and the Mail called the decision shameless. After opposition parties refused to play ball, the government has shelved its plans for a new committee to oversee standards and has said MPs will vote again on whether or not to suspend Owen Paterson. It's being described as a full-fat U-turn. Our very own Tom Harwood joins me now. Tom, what a 24 hours, what a morning.
This is becoming a repeated sort of situation for this government. How many times have we seen this government dig into an issue, and on an unpopular side of an issue, ask all its MPs to support it on that issue, ask some of its cabinet ministers to go out onto the press, into the media to defend that decision, only then to U-turn a number of hours later. We saw it, of course, with the Prime Minister and his farcical attempt to avoid self-isolation over the summer. He ended up U-turning just a couple of hours later. We saw it over the campaign for to feed hungry school children outside of school time, that Marcus Rashford campaign. There was a U-turn over that too. How many times have we seen MPs put out to defend what in reality became the indefensible in order for them only to roll back? This is becoming a real problem for this government, because the number of times, the more that you tell your MPs to fight for a unpopular cause and then say, oh, do you know what, the colleagues of yours who didn't follow what the whips did, they were right all along, that's going to make many MPs less likely to follow what the whips say in the future. It's becoming a real problem for this government, but also it shows the farce of yesterday, that amendment that retrospectively tried to change a system that many people agree is broken. There's no proper appeals process. It seems too harsh on some MPs and too lax on other MPs. There's broad agreement that this system of standards and the standards committee in the House of Commons is not working. However, trying to change it at a time when one rather popular MP gets into hot water, that just looks wrong.
Tom Harwood, thank you very much indeed for joining me. And joining me now is Sir Kevin Barron, former Labour MP for Rother Valley and former chair of the Privileges Committee, which later became the Standards Committee. Kevin, it is good to see you. There has been a U-turn by the government. In your view, is all going to be fine and dandy now?
Well, I think not, unfortunately. It is a U-turn and very welcome as well. But what we saw yesterday was an attempt, in my view, by the government, or by the government party anyway, and not all of them, to try and overthrow the decision of the committee in relation to Owen Paterson. It just seems it did so much damage that we've been trying to avoid for many, many years now. I sat on the committee. It was originally Standards and Privileges, and then they split into two. I sat on them from 2005 to 2018 when I stood down as the chair. And quite frankly, I have never seen anything as bad as this in all those years.
Why do you say that? Just explain what Owen Paterson did.
Owen Paterson has breached rules, and obviously I wasn't on the committee when this happened, but read the report. He breached rules that's been around since, some people say, about 1695, that you do not lobby and get paid for lobbying. We don't want a situation in this country where the law is passed by money that is given to, as it were, members of parliament. That's been well known for centuries. Something that when people have done that, like Cash for Questions back in the 1990s, action was taken. And we just know that Owen is completely out of order, in my view. What's more surprising is yesterday he then said that he would do it again. Now, given that the Conservative Party didn't drag all of their MPs through the lobbies, and thank goodness some of them did stand and be independent in relation to this matter, but they did turn round and drag people through who were reluctant to do so, only for today to as it were, to turn around and say, we made a mistake. I just think it's a horrendous piece of politics that most people thought we'd got rid of a few years ago, particularly after the expenses scandal in 2008-9.
And just explain, how clear is it? I mean, I, of course, was an MP too. How clearly are MPs made about the rules to which they must abide?
They made very clear. Listen, this is an instinct that most people have. If they've been a local councillor before they became an MP, this is something that is just, don't do things like this. You don't take money effectively for trying to influence. Particularly in the Patterson case, he was trying to influence different departments of government without telling them that he was being paid by these two organisations to do it. How the Tories got into a position of tabling an amendment yesterday by Dame Andrea Leadsom, who I dealt with when she was leader of the House. She must have known exactly what the implications were for that, and clearly didn't think of the outcome, that what would happen if they went ahead with that amendment. It's a complete and utter mess, and I'm sorry to say, I hope that people don't think all MPs are like this, because they are not. Even all Conservative MPs are not like this.
Just tell us how the Standards Committee works. Some people might consider it weird that there are any MPs on it at all.
Well, that's an interesting question, actually. I was on the General Medical Council as a lay member for a number of years, and I used to sit on Fitness to Practice as a lay member, and there were medical members on there as well, so I don't think there's anything wrong there. The big changes that have taken place is that when I took over the chairmanship, after the 2010 general election, is that we appointed lay members onto the committee. There is currently 7 lay members who are just ordinary members of the public who applied and have got through a system of being selected. And they are there to give assurance to members of the public that this is not a committee that is MPs looking after the interests of MPs. And I'm sad to say that that's been severely damaged by the antics of the government yesterday.
And how did we get this independent commissioner, the civil servant?
Well, yeah, absolutely. The Independent Parliamentary Commission came about because of the Cash for Questions debacle back in the 1990s. John Major, a Conservative Prime Minister, set up the Committee of Standards in Public Life, and they recommended that Parliament should have an independent parliamentary commissioner for doing investigations in relation to the conduct of members of Parliament. It's quite interesting that this morning at the Institute of Government, the chair of the Committee of Standards in Public Life, Lord Evans, was talking about their report that was looking at areas that need improvement, particularly around ministerial code and things like that. They weren't arguing that they needed improvement in terms of the way that the Standards Committee currently operates in the House of Commons. It's an extraordinary situation, and quite clearly he's rightly condemned the antics of yesterday and what the government were trying to do.
Now, some Conservative MPs have suggested that the committee has treated Tories, who there have been complaints about, much more harshly than Labour MPs when they have investigated complaints about both. Could that happen in your view? They do cite various examples of Tories, they say some Brexiteers, also being treated more harshly by the Standards Committee than some Labour MPs.
That, in my experience, that is absolutely not true. You may remember that there was a member of Parliament for Rotherham, the next door seat to the one that I represented at that time, called Dennis McShane. Dennis McShane ended up going to jail for fraud, and it was the Standards Committee, which I was chairing at the time, that was the key, and the Independent Commission that was the key for that to happen. The idea that there's any party politics in that room is a nonsense. I have to say, all the time that I chaired it, I used to say, as I said when I chaired the Health Select Committee, you leave your party politics at the door, you're coming in, do the job that our electors expect us to do, and pick them up on the way out. That's how it worked when I chaired the Standards Committee, and I'm sure that that's how it works now. It's being chaired by Chris Bryant.
And part of the argument prosecuted by the government yesterday in favour of change was that MPs don't have the opportunity to properly defend themselves, to appeal against the complaints that are made to them. Is that fair, in your view?
It is not fair. in my view, is that MPs can give not just written evidence. The argument about the 17 pieces of written evidence that they didn't call witnesses to as well. I understand the witnesses didn't want to come or didn't ask to come in front of the committee. So that's a bit of a... It is not the case that this has been treated any differently to any others. I am pretty certain of that, having read the report and listened to the current chair speaking in the chamber yesterday afternoon. It has not been treated any differently at all. The issue about appeal was never raised by Andrea Leadsom when we were having discussions with her about the future of committee and other matters when she was leader of the House. Every parliament, the rules are looked at and changed if there's an argument to change them. Nobody's ever come along, in my experience, and said, we want a proper appeal system.
Jacob Rees-Mogg says that he now wants to work towards getting a consensus for changing the system. Does he have a hope in hell of doing so?
Well, the last time that the rules were brought up to date was in 2015, and because of the two short parliaments we had in between, as you well know, that's due to take place now. What should happen is that the Parliamentary Commissioner and the current committee should go ahead with that review as soon as it's practicable. Keep it away from any current case that's now ready to be decided on, or indeed any that might be investigated in the future. That should happen. And if people want to make the case that there should be a different appeal system than there is at the moment, then obviously that should be put to the committee and eventually put to Parliament.
There will be a new vote on the fate of Owen Paterson. It doesn't look good, does it, for it to go his way again? It was quite narrow yesterday.
Well, first of all, let me say about yesterday's vote more than anything else. These matters to do with the Standards Committee have never been about party politics. It was the Conservative Party that put the amendment down. Andrea Leadsom clearly knew what she was doing by moving that amendment. And it was a Conservative Party that did that, in my view, to try and, as it were, avoid having to take a decision in relation to Owen Paterson. When they were challenged on the floor of the House, Jacob Rees-Mogg, the first thing he said, oh, you're party politicising it. This was his sort of case for the defence because people were going to have a go at him. They'd thought this tactic through and it's blown up massively in their face. I'm pleased it has. Any changes that should take place in relation to the rules that address the issue of conduct of members of Parliament should be done through the channels that there are now. It doesn't mean to say there couldn't be a different appeals process. If that's what Parliament decide, it should be done in that way by consensus. That's how we got lay members onto the committee. That's how we progressed, I think. And I thought we were getting to a stage where people had more faith in elected politicians than they'd had in the past. But I think yesterday it was a bit damaging for us.
Sir Kevin Barron, nice to see you and thank you very much for your time today. Thank you. After the break, we talk to polling guru Sir John Curtis and ask, will any of this cut through to voters? Before that, it's the weather.
Hi there. Still some showers around, but for most, it's looking like a dry Thursday with some decent spells of sunshine, particularly towards the west and the north. High pressure is ridging across the UK. That's helping to kill off a lot of the showers, but a few continue to affect western parts of Wales, Cornwall and North Sea coast with the wind coming in there from the north. That cold wind will continue to drive showers into parts of Lincolnshire, East Anglia, South East England and perhaps the East Midlands for a time. Also a few showers for West Wales and parts of Cornwall, but these tending to ease later and in between plenty of sunny spells. The wind feels cold, but out of the wind in the sunshine pleasant enough, 8 to 11 Celsius. The cloud thickens across northern and northwest Scotland later. Some outbreaks of generally light rain arrive here during the evening. They spread to other parts of mainly central and western Scotland overnight, a few light showers into Northern Ireland, northwest England and North Wales later. And this area of cloud across northwestern parts of the UK will keep things frost-free, a much milder night to come. But with clear skies further south, generally a frosty start to the day with temperatures in rural parts down to -1 or -2 Celsius. A chilly start, but a bright start, plenty of sunshine first thing, but the area of cloud to the north tends to sink south, turning cloudy for many places, but not a great deal of wet weather associated with the cloud. Mostly it's dry, the rain confined to windward coasts and hills of Wales, northwest England and western Scotland. A milder day, though, with that increased cloud cover coming in from the Atlantic, temperatures up to 10 to 13 Celsius. And then we keep a lot of the cloud cover on Friday night. Some clear spells around, so decent viewing conditions, I think, for bonfire night, with a lot of dry weather away from the northwest. It does turn more unsettled in the northwest this weekend, with heavy rain and strong winds for northern and western Scotland. It also turns milder.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News for To The Point.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Now, often Westminster gets into a huge state about something, but ordinary people up and down the country either don't know about it or just don't care. The government is clearly worried that this time this story might be different. Well, to tell us how this is likely to play with the great British public, I'm delighted to be joined by the one and only polling guru, Sir John Curtis. Sir John, lovely to see you. It does feel like the government may have really misjudged this one. What's your view?
Well, I think first thing we should be honest here and say at the moment we're in a data-free zone. That is, I don't think anybody as yet has actually published any polling on the subject. But I think perhaps we can draw on the contrasting experience of two previous occasions when the government got into trouble over allegations of not committing the rules and the way in which they played out very differently. So case number one is when the government in September of 2019 prorogued Parliament. Subsequently, that action was ruled illegal by the UK Supreme Court and was reversed. Now, that row did not cause the government much political damage for the simple reason that at least one half of the country, that is the half of the country that was in favour of leaving the European Union, basically applauded the government's actions because they felt that Parliament was trying to stymie the will of the people, or at least the will of those in favour of leaving the European Union. In other words, we have to bear in mind that very often people's views about whether or not due process has been followed depends on their views on the implications of that process for a substantive outcome. And if they are in favour of a particular outcome, they might be in favour of bending the rules. Case number 2, in contrast, is Dominic Cummings' famous road trip to Barnard Castle in the spring of last year, when we were all being told to stay at home in the first phase of the lockdown, don't go out of your home for more than an hour and don't go anywhere. Now, in that case, Mr. Cummings' actions undoubtedly caused the government considerable difficulty. Its polling ratings fell quite substantially. Here, of course, nobody had any particular advantage to draw. There was no substantive outcome that might mean that people might be supporting Dominic Cummings' actions rather than not. And I fear the government's difficulty is that probably this case is closer to a Dominic Cummings type example than it is to what happened over the proroguing of Parliament in 2019. Because at the end of the day, what was Owen Paterson doing? Well, he apparently was concerned about certain aspects of the food supply. But the truth is, we know that the public are particularly sensitive and concerned about sleaze, cash for questions, etc. We saw the reaction during the MP's expenses scandal of just over 10 years ago. And therefore, there is nobody who's got any particular reason amongst the public to be batting for Owen Paterson, and every reason why this is the kind of issue where people say they're just not wanting to follow the rules. Now, of course, at the end of the day, in the end, probably because the government has moved so quickly, the court of public opinion is not going to matter that much. It was pretty obvious yesterday that, even within the Palace of Westminster, even amongst Conservative MPs, there was a lot of disquiet. That disquiet looks as though it's been confirmed by some MPs' postbags and emails during the course of yesterday evening, and perhaps one or two unfortunate events with MPs' offices. And therefore, the truth is, at the end of the day, governments can only sustain what they do so long as they've got the backing of their MPs. And I think the truth is, what the whips were telling the government this morning was that they were rapidly losing the support of the parliamentary party, and therefore they needed a U-turn. Probably also not helped, in truth, by the way in which Owen Paterson then responded to the vote, rather than, in a sense, repenting and saying, well, maybe I didn't do everything quite right, but I'm grateful to my colleagues for having given me the benefit of the doubt. He ends up saying, I would have done exactly the same thing and I don't think I did anything wrong. So I suspect also that insofar as MPs' willingness to support Mr. Paterson was, to some degree, a degree of sympathy, that, as it were, he, in a sense, expended that sympathy rather fully. So there may still be some public reaction, but because the government's moved now so quickly, perhaps they will hope, and they might indeed be right, in thinking that indeed this story will now move on sufficiently quickly that there won't be that much damage.
So it may or may not have long-term damage for the government. If there is damage, does it necessarily follow that Labour benefit? Does A equal B, damage government, opposition, prosper?
No, the answer to that, of course, is no. And I think undoubtedly, and even if there hadn't been the U-turn this morning, a great deal would have turned on the ability or otherwise of the Labour Party to actually turn this to their advantage and begin to persuade the public that this was part of a wider story. Now, this has been something that, of course, the Labour Party has been trying to do for much of the last 18 months, particularly with arguments about, well, the government was cutting corners over contracts and the handling of the pandemic. There, I think the difficulty is, well, we might not necessarily be entirely happy about the way the government has done it, but given that what the government was trying to do was to deal with a public health crisis that none of us wanted to last any longer than necessary, you could see why it's more difficult to turn. So the truth is, as with so often these things, it will depend on the ability of the Labour Party to exploit the issue. Now, I think many people felt, indeed, The Prime Minister, in a sense, almost acknowledged yesterday in Prime Minister's questions that the Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, actually played the card at that point in time rather well. The question is, can the Labour Party continue to do that and make it part of a wider story? But the truth is, at the end of the day, just remember the issue of MPs not playing by the rules is one where people do tend to feel that nobody is particularly saintly in this respect, and therefore won't necessarily make it that easy for the Labour Party to make it part of a party political battle.
Sir John Curtis, it's always a pleasure to benefit from your wisdom. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you. After the news, it's the latest in my series of special interviews with MPs where we get behind the persona to find out about the real person. Today, I'm delighted to talk with Johnny Mercer about being sacked, being in disgrace with Boris Johnson and being, according to a recent survey, the most fanciable male MP.
Good afternoon, I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. The government have performed a U-turn over the proposed changes to disciplinary proceedings for members of Parliament. Speaking this morning, Jacob Rees-Mogg says that any changes to standards had to be done on a cross-party basis. The Leader of the Commons said that the link between the changes and the MP Owen Paterson's case had to be broken. MPs will now have an emergency debate next Monday to discuss the system. Cervical cancer rates are almost 90% lower in women who had HPV vaccines as children. A study published in The Lancet found that those who are now in their 20s who had the dose between the ages of 12 and 13 were far less likely to develop the disease than those who didn't have the jab. The Bank of England has decided to hold interest rates at a record low of 0.1%. The committee voted 7-2 in favour of holding the rate, which was cut to an all-time low in March of 2020. Australian police have charged a 36-year-old man in connection with the abduction of 4-year-old Cleo Smith. She was taken from her family's tent in Australia more than 3 weeks ago. Well, yesterday she was found alive and well in a locked house. More than 40 countries, including the UK, have pledged at the climate summit to quit using coal, the biggest single contributor to climate change. Countries including Poland, Vietnam and Chile have vowed to phase out coal power in the 2030s. Poorer nations have until 2040 to make the transition. Some of the largest consumers, though, of coal, Australia, India, China and the US, didn't sign the pledge. Retailer John Lewis has released its annual Christmas advert around a fortnight earlier than expected. Well, this year's story is based on that schoolboy building a friendship with an alien. The department store has recently withdrawn a home insurance advert after the Financial Conduct Authority said it could be misleading. You're up to date here on GB News. I'll be back with more at 1 o'clock.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Now, time for the latest in my series of special interviews with MPs where we go behind the politics and get to know the real person. Today, I'm broadcasting the interview I recorded yesterday with Johnny Mercer, the Conservative MP for Plymouth Moorview and the former British Army officer. Do you like being a Member of Parliament?
Do you know what? It's an incredible privilege, and you do sort of make gradual change. And I guess the stuff around casework is really rewarding, like when you can intervene and get stuff done. But it's a bit of a slog at the moment, yeah.
What's the most unexpected thing you've learnt about politics and Parliament?
Well, look, I mean, I came into this having had nothing to do with politics, right? I wasn't even a councillor. When I tried to be an MP, I didn't know how associations worked. I didn't know there were 650 constituencies. So that I was and remain, I think, to an extent, quite naive about politics. So quite a lot of it has surprised me, if I'm honest. But in a way where I didn't really have any preconceptions, it's all kind of news. And of course, I have been caught out and I've made mistakes and things haven't been as I hoped they would be and so on. So I think, and that's pretty plain for everybody to see. But, I'm never going to apologise for that. I think, we do kind of need to do better as politicians. And, ultimately we are voted in by people who go to work hard every day, who, are expected to uphold standards at work and work to a certain standard. And I think we should be as well. But, it's the last 6 months has been a big education for me, for sure.
Why? What's happened in the last 6 months?
Well, I mean, I was sacked from the government, which is fine. Everyone's got to get sacked every now and then. But then the kind of machine turns against you, right? And you realise, I guess, when people go around saying different things to different people, obviously you are eventually going to work that out. And that's obviously quite a painful process. And it's been a crash course in politics. And what I've learned is that whilst it did make me very cross at the time, and the Afghanistan situation as a failure of politics and what's happened to Dennis Hutchins over the last few weeks, the soldier on trial in Northern Ireland, it does kind of make me very cross. There is kind of no point howling at the weather, right? And I've got to find a way of doing things differently and in a better way to try and achieve the outcomes I'm trying to achieve. So it's been, I've learned a lot. I've learned, and I've made mistakes. I think I've been very critical of all my colleagues, which I think, in hindsight, I wouldn't do that again. There were good people in there. There were good people in there. But there's no doubt about it that, there are serious problems in the quality of our politics at the moment. And I think that, the public will only really put up with it for so long.
What's the biggest problem?
I mean, it's a broad field. I think, one of the things I found very difficult is this idea of teamwork, how teamwork... So I'm not really seen as a team player in politics, right? Which is absolutely bizarre if you look at my background, right? So the idea of being a team player, or teamwork, if you like, is totally different in political parties as it is to, for example, in my background, where you couldn't survive if you weren't a decent team player. And I think that creates sometimes a bit of a dangerous environment because people end up doing things they then regret and, voting for things they felt like they shouldn't vote for, saying things they felt like they shouldn't say, because you're kind of in that atmosphere and everyone's saying, well, if you don't do this, you're not part of the team. And I know individuals in there think, actually, this probably isn't the right thing to do. But they then sort of go and do it anyway, and because they want to be part of a team. And it's not a bad thing to want to be part of a team, but outside politics, that is completely the wrong thing to do. So, I think there's a lot of changes that I'd like to see in politics. But, in the big scheme of things, I've been here 5 minutes, and let's see what happens.
So the words that you
Oh, no.
said about Boris Johnson, who you were a big supporter of in the leadership contest. You said Boris Johnson surrounds himself with cowards and desperately weak advisors.
It's difficult when you're in this for a cause like I am, okay? So I'm not here because I like being a politician. I'm not here because I like the stage and I really want to progress in politics. I'm here for a cause, right? And when you're fighting for that cause and you receive such a setback and people are a little bit disingenuous about it, you are going to react quite badly. Now, would I say those things again? No. But unfortunately, they are true. Okay, the stuff around what we've just done to Northern Ireland veteran Dennis Hutchins, where he's essentially died in a court process, that has happened because of political cowardice, because we have not seen through our promises to our veterans. And, you know, so those are the facts of the matter. People can, you know, be uncomfortable with that, but that's the reality of it. If we committed to that, like we committed to Brexit, for example, or the European Football League, or the Green Agenda, okay, these veterans would see out their days in peace and we'd actually, you know, be on our way to being the best country in the world to be a veteran. But as it stands, we're a long way from that. And obviously that made me pretty cross at the time. And I feel like whatever I've done here, I do play everybody with a straight bat. Whether it's comfortable or not, I will play everybody with a straight bat. And I'll say the same thing to different individuals. And all I wanted to be treated was the same in return, right? With a bit of respect. You know, some individuals thought they could get away with not doing that. And I called it out, and people don't like it when you call it out, but, you know, unlucky.
Your cause is to support those people who serve our country and who have served our country. After you were fired, obviously you felt very angry and hurt by that episode. Do you speak to Boris Johnson still?
No, I have no relationship with Boris. I mean, I wrote to him about the Northern Ireland thing because I felt like when the government produced its solution to Northern Ireland, which I think is a bit crass, a bit ham-fisted, and it's going to upset a lot of people, there's better ways of doing it. I thought I kind of owed it to the Prime Minister to write what he should be doing and, you know, who he should speak to, the police and people, families, groups who've worked in this for a long time. There is a path through without just drawing a line and cutting off pathways to access for people whose kids were murdered by the IRA. That is a big step to take, but that is what the government proposals are. And I thought I owed it to him to write to him what they are. So I wrote him a letter, but, you know, he doesn't even bother to respond. So, you know, I have no relationship with the Prime Minister, which is sad. And, you know, and I feel, yeah, I mean, I'm going through that phase where I advocated for him very strongly because I thought the things that I cared about were going to happen and that he was my best chance of that stuff happening. And, you know, obviously now I feel like a bit of an idiot, but I've just got to wear that out. You know, that is politics. And I don't regret it because you know, because I genuinely thought we'd get change in these areas that I passionately care about. But you know, the Prime Minister lost interest in that agenda. And, you know, I mean, we just had PMQs where Angela Rayner spoke about veterans care and absolutely destroyed a Conservative Prime Minister on veterans care. I mean, how do you think that makes me feel as a Conservative, as the party of defence? It's very difficult times, yeah.
So you were a British Army officer. You served in Afghanistan. Just tell me about your experience as the most memorable or important lessons you learned from your time serving our country.
Oh, look, I mean, it's a huge privilege to lead men and women on operations. That is for me, that's the ultimate privilege. So, you know, getting to Parliament, I'm afraid, wasn't the high point of my life. You know, it's an enormous privilege being here, but for me, it's always been about what I did previously and how lucky I was. The experiences were, you know, massive highs and massive lows. And what those things do is teach you, yes, about a lot of things, but the single biggest thing it teaches you is about yourself. And critically, like, what you're not good at as well. And that's what I don't see in politics. Like, you're kind of expected to have an answer to everything, to know everything, to have a position on everything. Whereas actually, in the real world, most people who get to, you know, start rising up a profession and get quite good at it, realise they're quite good at that, but also know where the line is. And when they don't understand something, that doesn't happen in politics. so it's what it kind of taught me about myself as an individual and as a man, and how I grew into a man in the military. I joined very young. And the people is, for me, is what it's all about. I genuinely think they are the finest people in the nation. I make no apology for that. And I think we should look after them a lot better than we do. It's as simple as that.
Most people wouldn't have the courage to serve our country. Standing in a battlefield, I mean, it blows a lot of our minds to be able to do that, because we'd be scared. How often are you scared?
In politics?
No, when you're serving our country.
Oh, lots. Yeah. I mean, fear is totally normal, right? And I mean, so I wrote a book about it, and I was really surprised because the book's done really well, and I don't really sort of talk about it and promote it, because what's in the book is actually, it's, a lot of it doesn't reflect very well on me. A lot of people have come out of that, written all these stories about how I did this and how I did that. And what I tried to do is get across how it feels like to do that day after day after day, and have to really kind of grip your fear and become a master of yourself. And that was the challenge that I enjoyed, because, if you go out, if someone's getting hit on every patrol, right? Someone's getting shot on every patrol, someone's losing a leg on every patrol. You have to really master your body and your emotions to be able to lead guys and girls through that. And, so of course you get scared, but you've got to learn to control it. And look, I want to get away, though, from this thing that, people just feel sorry for veterans and all the rest of it. We volunteered to do it. I must be honest, a lot of it was absolutely brilliant. I loved it. It was the finest times it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. So, I don't want anyone feeling sorry for veterans. I think that's a big problem in this country, where people look at veterans and just feel sorry for them. We've got to go from sympathy to empathy. What does it actually feel like to be a veteran, and how do we make their lives easier rather than just feeling sorry for them?
And what's the prescription? What are we failing to do that we should be doing for veterans?
So on a macro level, I mean, we are before I set up the Office for Veterans Affairs, we were the only Five Eyes country in the world. So our comparative peer nations are kind of Australia, New Zealand, Canada, America. We were the only one of those without a dedicated Veterans Minister, without a dedicated Office for Veterans Affairs. I mean, we still don't have a dedicated Veterans Minister in the Cabinet, looking after veterans' interests. But setting up the OVA was the Office for Veterans Affairs was a big step. The trouble is, all the kind of political energy and money, even the money's being taken out of it.
Let's go back to your childhood. You are one of 7 siblings.
One of 8.
One of 8.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, you grew up with 7 siblings, forgive me.
I did, yeah.
You grew up in a strict Baptist family.
Yeah, it was great fun.
What does that mean?
So, Baptists are quite religious. Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Strict Baptists, right, are like strict Baptists. And they're good people, but it is a very formal, defined existence. And, so my family grew up in that environment, same clothes to church on a Sunday, hour and a half long services every Sunday and every opportunity. I mean, I've spent hours of my life sat on church benches listening to this stuff. And, and obviously that percolates into home as well. And, it's quite a challenging existence, I think, at times, yeah.
Do you have faith now?
No. No. I mean, I can't lie about it. No, I don't. Afghanistan knocked all that stuff out of me. When you see kind of man's inhumanity to man on that scale, I think it's very difficult to believe in anything, really.
You're very open about your views on politics. You're very straight talking, but I know from Westminster that it's not always good to be straight talking.
No.
Do you have friends in Parliament? I know you have friends I assume you have friends in real life, but do you have any friends in politics? Is it possible to have friends in politics?
So 6 months ago, I would have said no. But I do, yes, I have got friends. And it was difficult, it's difficult when you're a minister, and I think you become quite isolated from the parliamentary party. Because actually, if you think about what qualifies you to be a minister in the eyes of Prime Minister and things like that, often it's, it's a set of characteristics that probably wouldn't lend themselves to sort of being a close friend of mine, if I could put it like that. So, it was quite an insular experience of being a minister, and I was constantly fighting for this agenda, and essentially got, in some ways, felt like I was kind of set up to fail, right, with the Office for Veterans Affairs. So, of course, I do have friends, and I need to do better, I think, at cultivating that rather than, sort of kicking the doors down every day and asking why people aren't doing enough for veterans. And, and I hold my hands up to that. I think, I've learned a lot, like I said, over the last 6 months. And for me, I never had anything to do with politics before.
You never even voted. You never even voted until you were a candidate.
So I have to, politics, there's no point howling at the weather, right? So I have to find a way of making this stuff work and getting on and getting this stuff done that I want to get done, and bringing people with me. And, I've got to find a way of doing that, and that's, what I'm going to put my energies into. I'm not, I hear people saying to me, you're going to stay. I'm going absolutely nowhere. I don't see why I can't fight for my version of the Conservative Party as much as anybody else wants to fight for their version of Brexit or the Conservative Party or right-wing politics. I firmly believe in a moderate, compassionate Conservative Party. I think what we offered, certainly to left-behind communities like mine in Plymouth, was life-changing, and I was very proud of that, and I'm going to fight for that as hard as anyone else fights for their agenda.
Would you like to be a leader of the party?
No.
Okay, clear. Straight talking again. Right, let's talk to you about something more light-hearted. Very recently, in the last week, you were rated the most fanciable male Tory MP according to a dating site poll. How'd you plead?
Well, not guilty, because there's no polite way of my answer to that, which is, being. I don't want to comment on that. I'll just get myself in trouble again. But look, I'm delighted that I've actually won something for once. Yeah, first time I've won something. So there we go.
And you appeared in a Dove shower gel advert. Oh, I mean, you wouldn't be able to do that if you weren't regarded as a hunk.
Well, you say that, but I think what they were after was kind of, slightly sort of chubby past it men, to show that, that normal people use Dove. So I think they got that one spot on. But no, I've got no regrets over that. Paid the bills. When I was a candidate, I had nothing. I was on benefits, right? I was on tax credits and surviving, working on a building site. So if someone pays me 20 grand to be in an advert, I'm going to be in an advert for 20 grand. I'll do whatever they want, to be frank. So, I have no regrets about that. It was funny. And I understood it wasn't going to be shown in this country, actually. But then they showed it at half-time in the Super Bowl that year in America, and that's how everyone found out about it.
It's been one of my favourite Real Me interviews.
Don't you say that?
I don't
say that.
actually.
I know.
I don't actually, and you can watch the ending of all of my interviews.
Okay.
And I'm not sure I've said that before.
You're very kind, Gloria. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Johnny Mercer. Thank you. I really did enjoy that interview. You've been watching The Briefing with me, Gloria de Piero. The show is back every weekday from noon. Isabel will be with you tomorrow. Up next, it's On the Money with Liam Halligan. And then Liam and I will be together between 2 and 3, talking about whether we value our nurses enough in this country. But for now, it is time for your weather forecast. Thank you for being with me today.
Hi there. Still some showers around, but for most, it's looking like a dry Thursday with some decent spells of sunshine, particularly towards the west and the north. High pressure